my name is Jackie and I'm a librarian from the Sonoma County Library. Welcome to an episode of Sonoma Scares, where I'll be telling you the tale of La Llorona, the weeping woman. La Llorona is a classic folklore. It is believed to have originated in Mexico, although various Latin American countries have their own versions. Some scholars state that La Llorona is pre-Hispanic, that her legend has been told since the days the Spanish conquered the indigenous people of Mexico. Some believe that the Aztecs saw the vision of a goddess flying across the sky, wailing and crying for her children who were doomed to be colonized. And that's where the legend of La Llorona began. Thank you for listening to this version of La Llorona, the Weeping Woman, retold by Vigil from The Eagle on the Cactus, Traditional Stories for Mexico. According to the legend, there was once a beautiful indigenous maiden named Juanita who lived a peaceful life in a quiet village with her family. And although her family was poor, Juanita knew that they were hard-working people of the land and she loved her life. As a young girl, she spent many hours with her friends imagining the lives that they would have when they grew up. The most common game that they played was to imagine the man each one of them would marry. Like the innocent children that they were, they laughed and giggled as they described their knight in shining armor, their handsome man on the beautiful black horse, and their Spanish gentleman who would take them far away for a life of luxury. As Juanita grew up, her beauty blossomed like a rose in the summer light. She soon left the idle games of her childhood and settled into the responsibilities of being a young woman. She helped her mother take care of her younger siblings, and she would help take care of the household as well. Her parents were very proud of her, and they hoped that one day she would marry well and begin a family of her own. In truth, Juanita carried the same hopes for herself. She had never forgotten the games of her childhood and still carried the dream of the Spanish gentleman close to her heart. The young men of the village noticed Juanita's beauty, and they would play silly games to try and get her attention. And Juanita knew that one day her father would say yes to the family of one of these young men, but her heart still longed for a Spanish gentleman who would sweep her off her feet. And according to the legend, one day a Spanish gentleman moved to the village. His father had vast land holdings in the area, and he had come to take care of his family's interest. He was schooled in the manners and graces of the wealthy Spanish elite of Mexico City, and he immediately became the most prominent person in the village. When she first saw him, Juanita knew that the man of her dreams had come into her life. As time passed, the Spanish gentleman became bored with the simple ways of the village. He missed the excitement of Mexico City and regretted that he had accepted his family's assignment in the village. So he found ways to bring some measure of excitement in his life by establishing harmless flirtations with the young women of the village. In the strict moral code of the time, families carefully guarded their young women from any occasion that would bring shame to the family's honor. But every family also knew that the woman who married the Spanish gentleman would bring honor and wealth to the family. So, in spite of their strict customs, the Spanish gentleman found ample opportunity to meet and exchange flirtations with the young women of the village. It's at this point that the legend starts to turn towards its tragic events. Whether it was cursed fate, bad luck, or dark destiny, Juanita and the Spanish gentleman soon found each other. For him, she was the flaming spark of excitement for which he had been longing for. For Juanita, he was the Spanish gentleman come to true life. The Spanish gentleman focused all of his idle energy on Juanita. Her beauty captivated him, and he courted her with all the gentlemanly manner of his station in life. In her heart, Juanita knew that a man of his class would never marry someone like her, but her own longing for the Spanish gentleman of her dreams came to be her passion, and soon it was too late. Going against all of that her family had instilled in her, and against honor and common sense itself, her love-driven heart gave itself to the Spanish gentleman. To the shame of her family and the whole village, she had 2 children with the Spanish gentleman and lived with him as his common-law wife. Her love for the Spanish gentleman and her great joy in her 2 children comforted Juanita during his long absences as he returned to Mexico City to tend to his family's businesses. She would ease her children's longing for their father by telling them stories of his important work in Mexico City, and each night she would sing them to sleep with the lullaby of their father's eventual return. One day, however, the Spanish gentleman returned to the village riding in a fine carriage, accompanied by a Spanish señorita who was dressed in a gown of the finest white Spanish lace. As Juanita saw him ride by their house, she knew that her world had come to an end. Her children saw their father ride by without stopping and ran after the carriage, only to return home covered with its dust. That night, Juanita put her crying children to sleep and promised them that their father would be home in the morning. Late that night, Juanita went to the house where the Spanish gentleman was staying. She knocked on the door and a servant answered, and she asked to see the gentleman. The servant returned and told her that the Spanish gentleman did not want to see her. She then told the servant to tell him that his children wanted to see him. The servant soon returned with the cruel message. He told Juanita that the Spanish gentleman had said that he was in town with his intended Spanish bride, a señorita approved by his family, and that the children that she spoke of were not his legitimate heirs to his family's honor and wealth. The servant then slammed the door in Juanita's face. Juanita was struck with an anger that raged through her body. It came from the depth of her stricken heart. She was overcome with an immense sadness at the image of her children learning about their father's final words. In a blind fury, she raced home. When she saw her children sleeping the deep, peaceful sleep of childhood, she made up her mind that her children would never know the pain that she felt that night. She gently grabbed them and wrapped them in their blankets. As they started to awaken, she reassured them that everything was all right and that they should go back to sleep. Comforted by the words of their mother and the dreams of seeing their father in the morning, they both fell back to sleep. Juanita, guided by some unknown calling, stumbled to the river and in one valiant crazed heave tossed her children into the river. As soon as they had left her arms, she realized the tragic mistake and threw herself into the river to save them. But the river raged with a deadly force, and the 2 beautiful children would never awaken from their eternal sleep. Juanita climbed out of the river and wailed the most forlorn cry ever heard on this earth. ¡Ay, mis hijos, mis niños, mis hijos! The next day, the people of the village went down to the river to see what had caused the mournful wailing that they had heard the night before. Juanita's family found her clothes by the riverbank, and they knew that the doomed, sinful love of Juanita and the Spanish gentleman had come to an end. From that day on, the people of the village will swear that on some nights, especially the dark and violent nights of summer, they can hear a weeping woman moaning by the riverbank. Ay, mis niños, ¿dónde están mis niños? They tightly close their window shutters in an attempt to keep the woman's grief outside of their homes and away from their families and children. They tell the legend of La Llorona to anyone who will listen as a cautionary tale about how a bad love can bring grief, sadness, and tragedy to even the most beautiful of young women. The end.